I was on my way to the airport to drop off the wallet my husband had forgotten when the rideshare driver locked the doors and said, "Do not get out of the car. Trust me." My heart raced. It was almost 2 a.m, and I was alone with a stranger in a desolate place. 5 minutes later, 3 police cars surrounded us with sirens blaring. What I discovered that night destroyed everything I believed about my life. But before we continue, make sure you are subscribed to Elderly Stories and write in the comments where you are watching this video from. We love knowing how far our stories are reaching. It all started that Thursday, around 12:30 at night. I had just packed the suitcase for Michael. My husband needed to travel quickly to New York. He said it was for an urgent meeting with investors. Something about closing a major contract for the firm. I did not ask. I never asked. During the 4 years of our marriage, I had learned to be the understanding wife, the one who supports without asking uncomfortable questions. Michael was always the perfect husband in my eyes, attentive, hardworking, successful. He ran a financial consultancy that was thriving more and more. We lived in a spacious apartment in an exclusive neighborhood in Chicago. We had 2 imported cars in the garage, and I could dedicate myself to my work as a graphic designer, working from home without financial pressure. It was the kind of life many women dream of having. As I packed the last items in his suitcase, I noticed Michael seemed more anxious than usual. He checked his phone every 2 minutes, and his hands shook slightly as he chose his ties. I attributed it to the stress of the sudden trip. He gave me a quick kiss on the forehead, muttered a hurried, "I love you," and walked out the door carrying his suitcase and laptop bag. The sound of the door closing echoed through the empty apartment. I sighed, feeling that familiar emptiness that always invaded me when he traveled. I went to his office to turn off the lights and tidy up the mess of papers he had left scattered on the desk. That was when my eyes found a brown leather object hidden between the folders. Michael's wallet. My heart accelerated immediately. That wallet contained everything: IDs, credit cards, cash. How would he board the plane without his official ID? How would he pay for anything without his cards? I took the wallet with trembling hands and opened it to confirm. All his documents were there intact. I looked at the wall clock. 12:40 at night. Michael's flight was at 3 a.m. I still had time to take the wallet to the airport if I left immediately. I tried calling his cell phone, but the calls went straight to voicemail. He had probably put it on airplane mode, or maybe he was driving and could not answer. There was no time to lose. I needed to act. The problem is, I do not drive well at night. The headlights of other cars make me dizzy, and I have trouble seeing the lanes. Our private driver had left hours ago. The only option was to order a car through an app. I took my phone and opened the app with nervous fingers. I needed to find a driver quickly. Anxiety grew in my chest like a ball of fire. I imagined Michael arriving at the airport frantically searching for his wallet in his pockets, panicking when he realized he had forgotten it. He needed that wallet. I needed to take it to him. After a few minutes that seemed eternal, a driver accepted the ride. His name appeared on the screen: Frank, black sedan, 5-star rating. The app showed he was only 7 minutes away. I quickly threw a jacket over my pajamas, put a scarf over my hair, and grabbed my purse. I put Michael's wallet away carefully, as if it were a precious treasure. In a way it was. That wallet represented my mission to be the perfect wife. The one who solves problems and takes care of everything. 5 minutes later, the intercom buzzed. I looked through the camera and saw the black car parked in front of the building. I went down the elevator, quickly crossed the lobby, and went out to the street. The night was cold and damp. The streets of the neighborhood were deserted, illuminated only by orange streetlights that cast strange shadows on the sidewalks. I opened the back door of the car and got in. The interior was clean and smelled of lavender air freshener. The driver was a man in his 50s, gray hair at the temples, a thin and tired face. He greeted me with a silent nod without saying a word. "Good evening," I said, trying to sound natural. "I need to go to the airport, domestic terminal. It is urgent." He just nodded and started driving. The silence inside the car was heavy, almost suffocating. There was no music playing on the radio, no conversation, only the sound of the engine and the noise of tires on wet asphalt. I tried calling Michael once more, but again it went to voicemail. I sent him a text message. "Honey, you forgot your wallet. I am bringing it to the airport. Wait for me in the departures lobby." The message stayed with only one check mark. It was not delivered. I leaned back in the seat, trying to calm my nerves. I looked out the window and saw the city passing by quickly. We left the residential neighborhood and entered the main highway that led to the airport. Traffic was surprisingly light for a Thursday night. There were almost no cars on the road. That was when I started to notice something strange. The driver, Frank, was constantly looking in the rearview mirror. Not just normal traffic checks, but long, intense looks, as if he were looking for something or someone. Our eyes met in the mirror a few times, and each time it happened, a chill ran down my spine. There was something in his expression that made me uncomfortable. It was not threatening exactly, but there was a tension in his face, a worry I could not understand. I clutched Michael's wallet to my chest, suddenly very aware that I was alone in a car, with a stranger in the middle of the night, going to a distant airport. Stories I had read on social media about crimes involving rideshare drivers began to invade my mind like unwanted ghosts. "Is everything okay?" I asked, trying to break the heavy silence. Frank did not answer immediately. He changed lanes abruptly, making my body sway in the seat. My heart started beating faster. "Sorry," he said finally. His voice was hoarse and low, just checking the traffic. But there was no traffic. The highway was practically empty. I took my cell phone discreetly and pretended to be checking some app, but actually I had my finger on the emergency button. If something happened, I needed to be ready to call for help. As we approached the airport, the tension in the car increased. Frank continued looking in the mirrors obsessively, and now I could see beads of sweat on his forehead despite the air conditioning being on. His hands gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white. Something was wrong. Very wrong. The airport lights began to appear in the distance, an artificial glow against the black sky. Normally that sight would bring me relief, but that night it only intensified my fear. Because instead of going straight to the main departure terminal, which was well lit and full of movement, Frank began to veer the car toward a darker side area. "Wait," I said, my voice coming out higher pitched than normal. "Domestic departures is that way." I know he replied, but he did not change direction. Panic began to take over me. My hand gripped the cell phone tight, ready to activate the emergency alarm. I looked around looking for possible exits, calculating if I could open the door and jump out of the moving car. Frank drove to a less crowded drop-off area far from the main doors. There were only a few streetlights working, creating patches of darkness between circles of dim light. No security guards in sight. No other cars. Just the two of us and the threatening darkness. The car began to slow down. My heart was beating so loud I could hear it in my ears. I put my hand on the door handle, ready to run as soon as the car stopped. But when I tried to open it, the door did not move. It was locked. The child safety locks had been activated by the driver. I was trapped. Panic exploded in my chest like a bomb. I pulled the handle hard. Once, twice, 3 times. But the door remained firmly closed. I tried the other door on the opposite side, stretching my body desperately, but it was also locked. All the doors were locked. I was completely trapped inside that car, with a stranger in a desolate place in the middle of the night. "Why did you lock the doors?" My voice came out trembling, almost a scream. "Open them! Open them now!" Frank did not turn around. His hands kept gripping the steering wheel, and he kept his eyes fixed on the dark area in front of us. Sweat was now running openly down his face. "Do not get out here," he said, his voice low but urgent. "Please trust me. Trust you." I was almost hysterical now. "You locked me in the car. Let me out. Help." I started banging on the window, trying to get the attention of anyone who might be passing by. But the area was completely deserted. I grabbed my cell phone with shaking hands, ready to call the police. Listen." Frank finally turned to me, and I could see genuine terror in his eyes. "I'm not going to hurt you, but if you get out of this car now, something very bad is going to happen to you. You need to trust me. Please." "Why?" I screamed. "Why can I not get out? What is going on? You will know in 5 minutes," he replied, turning back to the front. 5 minutes. It is all I ask. Stay in the car for 5 minutes. Tears began to stream down my face. My mind was going in 1,000 different directions. Was I being kidnapped? Was he taking me somewhere? But why? I was not famous. I did not come from a politically important family. It made no sense. I looked around desperately, searching for something I could use as a weapon. My purse was beside me. Inside, it was a pepper spray I always carried, but it was buried at the bottom, and I would have to dig through everything to find it. The seconds passed like hours. Frank remained motionless in the front seat, staring obsessively outside, as if he were waiting for something. Or someone. "Do you work for my husband?" I asked, suddenly, a new theory arising in my confused mind. "Did he send you to do this? Is it some kind of test?" "I do not know your husband," Frank replied without looking back, "but I know your father." My blood ran cold. My father. My voice came out as a whisper. "My father died 3 years ago. I know. I worked for him. I was his head of personal security for 15 years. The memories began to return. My father owned a chain of construction supply stores. He had personal security, especially after our family began receiving threats from competitors. I vaguely remembered an older man always present in the shadows when my dad went to important events. "Frank," I whispered, finally making the connection. "You are the Frank who worked with my dad." "Yes," he nodded slightly. "Before dying, your dad asked me for one last favor. He made me swear I would watch over you even from a distance, that I would keep you safe." "What does that have to do with now? Why did you lock me in this car?" "Because I received information earlier today that something was going to happen to you tonight. Something very bad. My heart was beating so hard it hurt. What kind of thing?" "You were going to be kidnapped. As soon as you got out of this car, there was a man waiting in the shadows to drug you and take you away. When I saw you had ordered a car to come to the airport in the middle of the night alone, I hacked the system and accepted the ride before another driver could. I needed to be the one to pick you up, to protect you." I tried to process what he was saying. It seemed like madness, like a movie story. But the genuine terror on his face, the tension in his body, it all seemed too real to be a lie. Who would want to kidnap me? I asked, my voice failing. "I do not have liquid cash. I am nobody important." "You have a lot of money," Frank said calmly. "The inheritance your father left you, and you are married to someone who knows exactly how much that inheritance is worth." The world seemed to stop around me. Michael. Frank did not answer, but his silence was answer enough. I looked at my husband's wallet still clutched against my chest, and suddenly it seemed to weigh tons. Had Michael forgotten the wallet on purpose? Did he know I would come running to bring it to the airport? Was this all a trap? "No," I whispered. "No. Michael loves me. He would never do this to me. You are wrong. Look." Frank pointed to the clock on the dashboard. 2 minutes left. 2 minutes for what? My whole body was shaking now. I did not know if I should believe him or try to escape anyway, but something in the sincerity of his voice, in the terror of his eyes, made me stay. I sat there holding my breath, counting the seconds. 90 seconds, 60 seconds, 30 seconds, and then exactly when the clock struck 2:05, red and blue lights exploded around us. 3 police cars emerged from different directions, completely surrounding our car. Deafening sirens tore through the silence of the night. Officers jumped out of the cars with weapons drawn, shouting orders. But they were not pointing at us. They were pointing at something behind our car in the shadows I could not see well. I turned my head and saw when the officers tackled a figure hiding behind a concrete pillar. It was a man dressed all in black, wearing a ski mask. He He tried to run but was violently taken down to the ground. 2 officers subdued him, while a third removed something from his jacket pocket, a syringe, and a cloth that looked soaked in some chemical. My stomach churned. That man was there waiting for me. If I had gotten out of the car, as was my plan, he would have grabbed me, put that cloth on my face, drugged me. And then what? Taken where? To do what with me? The tears returned, but this time they were different. They were not tears of fear of Frank, but of absolute terror for what had almost happened. An officer knocked on the driver's window. Frank rolled down the glass. "Operation successful," the officer said. "Suspect is in custody. You are safe now." Frank finally unlocked the car doors. The sound of the lock clicking open was the sweetest sound I have ever heard in my life. But I could not move. My body was paralyzed by shock. Frank turned to me, his face now more relaxed, although still worried. "I'm so sorry to have scared you," he said softly. "But if I had told you what was happening, you might have panicked and tried to get out of the car anyway. I needed to keep you inside, keep you safe until the police arrived." "How did you know?" I managed to ask. "How did you know this was going to happen?" "I have contacts. People who owe me favors from the time I worked with your dad. One of those people heard conversations, saw messages. He warned me a kidnapping was being planned for tonight at the airport, that you would be the victim." "But who?" I was starting to go into shock. "Who planned this?" Frank hesitated. His expression became even more serious. "I need to show you something," he said slowly, "but you have to be prepared. What you are going to see will hurt much more than what just happened." He picked up a tablet that was on the passenger seat and handed it to me. On the screen was a series of photos. Surveillance photos taken from afar, but sharp enough for me to perfectly recognize who was in them. Michael, my husband. But he was not alone. In the photos, Michael was hugging a woman I knew very well. Sarah, my best friend since college. The same Sarah who was the maid of honor at our wedding. The same Sarah who came to dinner at our house every week. In the photos, they were kissing. They were hugging, entering hotels together. The last photo showed the 2 of them at the airport, not in the domestic terminal where Michael should be, but in the international terminal. And they were not boarding for New York. They were boarding for Paris, with 2 large suitcases of someone who does not plan to return. I cannot describe exactly what I felt in that moment. It was not anger. It was not sadness. It was as if something inside me simply disintegrated, as if the last 4 years of my life were a lie so big my brain could not process the truth. My hands shook so much I almost dropped the tablet. I kept swiping through the photos one after another, as if watching a horror movie I could not turn off. There were dozens of them. Photos of romantic dates, photos of passionate kisses, photos of them entering and leaving apartments I did not know. The last photo had a date and time in the bottom corner. It had been taken less than 3 hours ago at the check-in counter of the international airport. "No," I whispered, my voice breaking. "No, no, no." But the photos did not lie. The reality was they're captured in sharp and cruel pixels. "There is more," Frank said, his voice heavy with pity. He took the tablet back and opened a different folder. "Financial information. Documents we got through a private investigator I hired 2 weeks ago when I started to suspect. Look." On the screen appeared bank statements. My bank statements. From the joint account I shared with Michael but rarely checked because I trusted him completely. He handled the household finances, the investments, everything. Huge transfers, hundreds of thousands of dollars being moved systematically from the joint account to an account I did not recognize, an offshore account. The transfers had been happening for over a year. "He was stealing from you," Frank explained, systematically. "He had access to the inheritance your dad left you because you put everything in a joint account when you got married. You thought you were being a modern and trusting wife, but he was waiting for exactly that." Tears streamed freely now. I sobbed, hugging my own body, rocking back and forth in the back seat of the car. But the money was not enough. Frank continued relentless. It was better that I knew everything at once. Like ripping off a Band-Aid. There is something else. He opened another document. It was a life insurance policy. A massive policy. $5 million. With me as the insured and Michael as the sole beneficiary. The policy had been opened 6 months ago. I did not even know of its existence. How did he manage to do that without my signature? I asked, my voice coming out strange, distant, as if it were not mine. You signed it, Frank said softly. Remember that time, a few months ago, when Michael asked you to sign some papers from the accountant? He said it was the tax return. I remembered. It had been a Saturday morning. Michael had brought a stack of papers for me to sign. I was in a hurry making lunch, and he was rushing me, saying the accountant needed the documents urgently. I signed everything without reading. I trusted him. Why would I read? In the middle of those papers was the insurance policy, Frank explained, and along with it, a power of attorney giving Michael full powers over all your assets, including the properties you inherited from your dad. I was dizzy, literally dizzy. I opened the car door, which was now unlocked, and threw up on the street. My body physically rejecting that horrible reality. When I finished, I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand and leaned back in the seat, feeling completely empty. So the plan was to kill me, I said. Not as a question, but as a realization. The kidnapping tonight. They were going to kill me. Michael would keep the insurance, the properties, everything, and he would be in Paris with Sarah, starting a new life with my money. Exactly, Frank nodded. The man the police just arrested is a known criminal. He was hired to do the dirty work. After the kidnapping, your body would probably be found somewhere simulating a robbery gone wrong. Michael would be in another country with a perfect alibi. He would return to the U.S. as the devastated husband. He would cry in interviews, receive condolences, and then disappear to Europe with your entire inheritance. It was a perfect plan. Diabolical, but perfect. How did you discover all this? I asked. How did you know it was going to happen tonight? When your dad was dying, Frank began, he made me promise I would take care of you. He had a feeling about Michael, you know. He never liked him, never fully trusted him. He said there was something fake in the way Michael looked at you, as if he were evaluating an investment instead of looking at the woman he loved. I remembered the arguments between my dad and Michael. I remembered how my dad had been against the wedding at first. I thought he was just an overprotective father who did not want to accept his daughter was growing up, but he had seen something that I, blinded by passion, could not see. After your dad died, I kept watching you from afar, Frank continued. Not all the time, but periodically. I checked your social media, kept in touch with some employees of your dad's company who now worked for you, and 3 months ago, one of those contacts told me something strange. Michael had asked about how to sell inherited properties without attracting the attention of tax authorities. That made me suspicious. I hired a private investigator. It was him who discovered the affair with Sarah, the money transfers, the fake insurance policy. Everything started to fit together. And a week ago, my contact in the criminal underworld warned me that someone had put a contract on the head of a young, wealthy woman. The description matched you. I did not know exactly when or where it would happen, but I stayed on high alert. Tonight, when I saw your trip request in the system to the airport alone in the middle of the night, I knew. It was the perfect opportunity for a kidnapping. Public place, but with desolate areas. A time when you would be vulnerable. And the perfect alibi for Michael, who would be in another country. I hacked the app system to ensure I would be the assigned driver. And I alerted my contacts in the police. They were monitoring the situation, waiting for the criminal to appear. The plan was to catch him in the act. I was listening to everything, but it seemed like a dream. A nightmare from which I could not wake up. The wallet. I said, suddenly looking at the cursed object that was still beside me on the seat. He left the wallet on purpose, right? Yes, it was the bait. He knew you are the type of person who would go out in the middle of the night to help him. He counted on that, on your kindness, your dedication, your love for him. Each word was a stab in my already shattered heart. I took the wallet with shaking hands. For the first time, I examined it for real. I opened all the compartments, and that was when I found it. A folded piece of paper hidden behind the credit cards. When I opened the paper, I saw it was a copy of another document, a deed, transferring the main property of my inheritance, the commercial building downtown that was worth millions, to Michael's name, and right below, a signature, my signature. But I had never signed that, Forgery Frank said, looking over the seat. With the power of attorney you signed without knowing, he may have forged other signatures too. He probably already transferred several properties to his name, all planned so that as soon as you died, he would already have legal control of everything. No complications, no waiting for a will, no family fighting over the inheritance. It was genius. It was monstrous. I looked out the car window. The police were still dealing with the kidnapper. An ambulance had arrived. Other officers were securing the perimeter collecting evidence. And somewhere inside that airport in the international terminal, Michael was waiting to board, waiting to leave for Paris with Sarah, with my money, waiting to receive the news that the plan had worked, that I was dead. But I was not dead. I was very much alive, and absolutely furious. The sadness that had consumed me began to transform into something different, something cold and sharp. A crystalline rage that gave me a mental clarity I had not had in hours. Where are they? I asked, my voice now firm. Michael and Sarah, where exactly are they? Frank checked his watch. Their flight leaves in 40 minutes, International Gate 12. But you cannot just go and confront them. It would be dangerous. I am not going to confront them. I said, my mind already working, planning. Not yet. I need to be smart about this. I looked at Frank. At this man I barely knew, but who had saved my life, who had kept the promise he made to my dying father. You said you have a private investigator. Is he good? The best? And your contacts in the police? Can they help with what I am going to need? Frank smiled for the first time that night, a small but genuine smile. What do you have in mind? I did not sleep that night. How could I? While Michael boarded for Paris, believing his plan was unfolding perfectly, I was at a police station giving my full statement. The kidnapper had confessed everything when confronted with the evidence. He said he had been hired by a man he knew only as Leo. The description matched Michael perfectly. There were text messages on a burner phone with detailed instructions on where to pick me up, when to act, and how to make it look like a robbery gone wrong. The evidence was overwhelming, but the detective in charge of the case gave me advice I will never forget. Ma'am, he told me, looking at me with those tired eyes of someone who has seen everything in life, we have enough evidence to arrest your husband as soon as he returns to the U.S., but if you really want to destroy his plan completely, if you want to recover everything he stole, you need to be smarter than that. What do you mean? He cannot know that you know. If he finds out the kidnapper was arrested, that the plan failed, he will never return to the country. He will stay in Europe or flee to a country without extradition. And even if we manage to arrest him eventually, the money he transferred to offshore accounts will be almost impossible to recover. I understood what he was saying. If I wanted true justice, I needed to play Michael's game. I needed to pretend nothing had happened. But how am I going to do that, I asked. He will expect to receive the news of my death. When that does not happen, he is going to suspect. Exactly, the detective agreed. That is why you need to create a story that explains why you did not go to the airport, why you are alive, but in a way that does not raise suspicions, We spent the next few hours working out a plan. With the help of Frank, the private investigator, and a prosecutor specializing in financial crimes who joined us, we created a perfect story. When the sun began to rise, I was back in my apartment. It seemed like a different place now. Every corner held memories that I now knew were false. The sofa, where we watched TV together. The bed where we made love. The kitchen where I made his favorite breakfast every Sunday. All lies, all a facade, but I could not show that I knew, not yet. I lay in the bed that still smelled of his cologne and forced my eyes to close for a few hours. I needed to be rested for what was coming next. At 9 in the morning, my cell phone rang. It was Michael. I looked at the screen for a long moment before answering. My hand was shaking, but I took a deep breath, put on my best loving wife mask, and answered. "Honey." His voice sounded falsely animated. "Are you okay? I tried calling you last night several times." "Hi, my love," I replied, forcing a sleepy tone. "Sorry. I fell asleep early and left my phone on silent. I was so tired." There was a pause on the other end, a pause that lasted only 2 seconds but seemed like an eternity. He was confused. I should be dead. Why was I answering the phone normally, talking about falling asleep early? "Oh," he said finally. "So, you did not go to the airport." "Airport? Why would I go to the airport?" Another pause. Longer this time. "Your wallet," I said, following the script we had prepared. "You forgot your wallet here at home. I was going to take it to you at the airport, but when I was getting ready to leave, I got a horrible migraine. One of those really strong ones. I took a pill and passed out on the sofa. I just woke up." "Sorry, honey. Did you manage to board without the wallet?" I could hear Michael breathing on the other end. He was trying to process the information, trying to understand what had gone wrong with his perfect plan. Yes, I managed." He lied. Of course he had managed to board. He had his real documents with him. The forgotten wallet was just bait. He had a copy of my ID in his suitcase. Everything went well. That is good. I feigned relief. I was so worried. "How is the meeting going?" "Great. Great." He lied again. "It might take a few days longer than I thought. Maybe a week." "Will you be okay alone?" A week. Enough time for him to find out his plan had failed. Time for him and Sarah to come up with a new plan or simply disappear. "Of course, honey. You know I will. Just take care and text me every day, okay?" "Okay. I love you." The words came out of his mouth so easily. "I love you." How could he say that knowing he had hired someone to kill me? "Me too," I replied, almost choking on the words. I hung up and immediately dropped the phone on the floor. I ran to the bathroom and threw up again. There was nothing in my stomach to come out, but my body kept contracting, trying to expel the disgust I felt. After I composed myself, I called Frank. He called. I reported. He bought the story, but said he is staying away for a week. "Perfect," Frank replied. "That gives us time. The investigator is already tracking his bank movements. And I have good news. We got a court order to freeze his offshore accounts." The judge was very receptive when I showed the evidence of the murder plot. And Sarah, she is with him in Paris. She posted a photo on Instagram an hour ago. They are at a 5-star hotel. She captioned it, "Well-deserved vacation." Frank could not hide the contempt in his voice. Well-deserved vacation. With my money, celebrating what she thought was my death. "I want to see the photo," I said. "I do not think that is a good idea. I want to see." Frank sighed but sent me the link. I opened Sarah's Instagram with my heart racing. There she was in a bikini at a luxurious pool overlooking the city of Paris, smiling broadly, radiant, and in the background, slightly out of focus but clearly visible, was Michael, also smiling, holding a glass of champagne. The comments were all from mutual friends of ours. "How amazing. You deserve it. Enjoy it so much. Jealous, in a good way. If only they knew." I spent the next few days preparing. The private investigator brought more information. Michael and Sarah had been together for almost 2 years. It started at an office party where Sarah worked, and Michael had gone as my date. They had connected, exchanged numbers, and the affair began shortly after. The evidence was painful to see. Passionate text messages, intimate photos, videos that made me want to die of shame and anger. But I forced myself to watch everything. I needed to know the full extent of the betrayal. The investigator also discovered Michael had debts. Lots of debts. Online gambling, bad investments, loans with loan sharks. He was drowning in debt I never knew existed. My money was not just greed, it was necessity. He needed those millions to pay his debts and start a new life with Sarah. How much does he owe? I asked. Almost $200,000, the investigator replied, and the loan sharks are getting impatient. There are death threats in the messages. He was desperate. That is why the timing of the plan. He could not wait any longer. He needed the insurance money and the properties now before the loan sharks decided to eliminate him first. And did Sarah know about all this? Every conversation between them is documented. Yes, she knew. She was actually the one who suggested the kidnapping plan. She was the one who found the criminal through her contacts. Michael was the financial brain, but Sarah was the strategist. My best friend. The woman I considered a sister, who had been my bridesmaid, who I had comforted when her relationships ended, who had spent holidays with my family. She had planned my death. On the 4th day, Michael called me again. "Honey, I have bad news." He said, his voice perfectly calibrated to sound disappointed. "The meetings here are going to take longer than I thought. Maybe 2 weeks. 2 weeks. I feigned surprise. "Wow, that long? Yes, people here are very complicated, but the contract will be worth it. When I return, let's take a trip, just the two of us, to celebrate. What do you think?" A trip. Probably to some remote place where it would be easy to fake an accident. But I played along. I would love that. "Where are you thinking?" "I will let it be a surprise," he said, and I could hear the venomous smile in his voice. After hanging up, I sat on the floor of my bedroom and finally let the tears fall. I cried for all the lies, all the betrayals, all the moments I thought were real but were just theater. I cried for the naive version of myself that had died that night at the airport. But after crying, I got up, washed my face, and did something I had never done before in my life. I called a lawyer specializing in complicated divorces and asset recovery. It was time to fight back. The lawyer Frank recommended was a woman named Ms. Linda Luna. She had short gray hair, thick-rimmed glasses, and a look that seemed to see through lies with the ease of someone reading a menu. In her impeccably organized office, she reviewed all the documents the investigator had gathered. "This is one of the clearest cases of attempted murder for financial gain I have ever seen," she said, after an hour analyzing everything. "And we have something most victims do not have. Concrete evidence before the crime was consummated. So can you help me recover everything I asked? More than that, I can help ensure your husband spends decades in prison, and your friend too." The word friend still hurt when applied to Sarah. How had I been so blind? Ms. Luna explained the legal strategy. First, prosecute Michael for attempted murder conspiracy to commit murder document forgery and embezzlement. Simultaneously, move civil actions to recover all the money he had transferred illegally and annul all power of attorney documents and fake signatures. "Timing is crucial," she explained. "We need to wait for the right moment to act. If we do it too soon, he might flee to a country without an extradition treaty. If we wait too long, he might dissipate more assets. When would be the ideal moment?" "When he returns to the U.S., when he steps on American soil again thinking he is safe, that his plan is working. That is where we act. But how are we going to make him come back? He might just stay in Europe indefinitely." Ms. Luna smiled. It was a smile that had no warmth. It was the smile of a predator that just spotted prey. That is where our bait comes in. You are going to order him to come back, and he will come running. We spent the next few hours planning every detail. It was risky, but it could work. It had to work. That night, I recorded a video message for Michael. It had to look natural, spontaneous, so I recorded several times until it sounded perfect. "Hi, honey," I started, forcing a smile. "I know you are super busy over there, but I had some news and could not wait to tell you. Remember that land my dad owned in the Hamptons? The one we always thought was not worth much. Well, a buyer appeared, and he is offering $3 million cash." I paused to let the number sink in. "I know it is crazy, but it is a big developer. They want to develop a luxury building there, but the best part is they want to close the deal this week. The broker said if I do not accept soon, they are going to look for another land. I did not want to decide something so big without you here. Do you think you can come back a few days early, just so we can sign the papers together and decide what to do with all that money? I love you. Come back soon." I sent the video and waited. The answer came in less than 15 minutes. "Honey, what amazing news. $3 million. Of course, I am going to come back. I am going to rearrange everything here. I arrive the day after tomorrow. Do not sign anything without me, okay? We are going to decide this together. Love you so much." I had caught the fish. Of course there was no buyer, there was no $3 million offer. It was all a lie. But Michael did not know. All he saw were more millions to put in his offshore account. More money to support his new life with Sarah. He took the bait. I notified Ms. Luna and Frank. "He arrives in 2 days." "Perfect." Ms. Luna replied. "I am going to prepare all the legal documents. The moment he arrives in the U.S., we will have arrest warrants, account freezing orders, everything ready. But we have to wait for him to step into the airport. And Sarah, she is still in Paris. Our jurisdiction does not reach there. But we have an international preventive detention request in process. As soon as she tries to enter any country with an extradition treaty with the U.S., she will be arrested." The next 2 days were the longest of my life. I tried to maintain the appearance of normality. I left the house, went to the grocery store, answered messages from other friends as if nothing was happening. But inside, I was a bundle of anxiety and anticipation. Michael texted me constantly saying how anxious he was to return, how much he missed me, how we were going to celebrate that amazing land sale. Each message was a lie so well constructed that if I did not know the truth, I would have believed completely. The night before his arrival, I could not sleep. I stared at the ceiling, going over the plan hundreds of times in my head. What if something went wrong? What if he suspected? What if he fled before the police could arrest him? But no. I had to trust the plan. I had to trust that justice would be done. The morning of Michael's arrival, Ms. Luna called me. "Everything is ready. The federal agents will be at the airport. The moment he passes through immigration, he will be arrested. Do you want to be there?" "Yes," I answered without hesitation. "I want to see his face." I met Frank at the airport entrance. He had a serious but supportive expression. Together we went to an observation room the authorities had prepared. From there, we could see the international arrival area through a mirrored glass. It was 3 in the afternoon when the flight from Paris finally landed. My heart beat so fast I thought it was going to explode. I saw when the first passengers began to come out dragging their suitcases, some being greeted by happy relatives. And then I saw him. Michael came out through the arrival door dragging his suitcase, wearing the gray suit I had bought for him on his last birthday. He was smiling, checking his phone, probably sending me a message saying he had arrived. He headed to the immigration line without haste, without a worry in the world. He presented his passport to the officer who scanned it in the system. That was when everything changed. I saw the officer say something into the radio. Immediately, 2 federal agents approached Michael from behind. He still had not realized anything. He kept smiling, waiting to receive his passport back. When the agents touched his shoulders, he turned around, confused. One of the agents said something I could not hear from where I was. Michael's expression changed from confusion to absolute shock in a matter of seconds. He began to speak, gesturing, trying to explain something. But the agents were not interested in explanations. One of them held Michael's arm while the other pulled out handcuffs. That was when Michael panicked. He tried to break free, looking around desperately, as if searching for an exit. But he was surrounded. More officers approached. The handcuffs were placed on his wrists, and it was in that moment that he looked in the direction of the mirrored glass. He could not see me, but our eyes met through the glass. I do not know if it was coincidence or if some primal instinct told him where I was, but I swear I could see the exact moment he understood. The moment he realized I knew everything, that the plan had failed, that he had been caught. The expression on his face was of pure terror. He screamed something. He tried to run, even while handcuffed, but was taken down to the floor by the agents. Other travelers watched the scene, shocked, taking out their phones to film. Michael was being dragged across the airport floor, screaming my name when I finally broke down. I fell to my knees in that observation room, sobbing uncontrollably. It was not sadness. It was relief. It was anger. It was satisfaction. It was everything mixed in an emotional storm I could not control. Frank hugged me, letting me cry on his shoulder as if he were my father. And in that moment, he was. He was the father figure my father was no longer here to be. He was the protector who had saved my life and was now helping me reclaim it. "It is over," he whispered. "You are safe now. It is over." But it was not over, not completely yet. Michael was taken directly to a holding cell at the federal station in the airport. Miss Luna informed me he had the right to a lawyer and would probably remain silent until one arrived. It was standard procedure, but what she did not expect was that Michael would start talking immediately, trying to make a deal, trying to blame others. He is saying he was coerced. Ms. Luna called me 2 hours after the arrest, saying Sarah planned everything, that she threatened him, that he was the victim, and do the police believe him? Of course not. We have the messages between them. We have the bank transfers he authorized himself. We have the statement from the hired criminal identifying specifically Michael as the one who paid him. He is just trying to reduce his sentence. And Sarah, does she know Michael was arrested? Not yet. She is in Paris. She posted a photo on Instagram an hour ago from a fancy restaurant, completely oblivious. I looked at the photo on my phone. Sarah was stunning in a red dress, holding a glass of wine, smiling at the camera as if she did not have a worry in the world. The caption read, "Life is beautiful when you are with the one you love." When you are with the one you love. She was talking about my husband, about the man she had helped plan my murder. "I want to talk to him," I said suddenly. "To Michael. I want to see him face to face." "I do not recommend it," Ms. Luna replied immediately. "It can be very traumatic for you and he might try to manipulate you. That is what people like that do. I need to do it. I need to look him in the eye and ask why." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Okay, I will arrange it. But I will go with you. And it will be in a supervised room with guards present. If at any moment you want to leave, we leave." Agreed. Agreed. The meeting was scheduled for the next day. I spent the whole night awake rehearsing what I would say, imagining what it would be like to look at the man I loved and see a stranger. When I arrived at the station, my hands were shaking so much that Frank, who insisted on accompanying me, along with the lawyer, had to hold my arm to guide me down the halls. Michael was in an interrogation room. Through a glass window, I could see him before entering. He was no longer wearing the elegant suit. It had been changed for an orange inmate uniform. His face was pale, deep circles under his eyes. He looked like he had aged 10 years in 2 days. When I opened the door and entered, he lifted his head. Our eyes met, and to my surprise, he began to cry. "Honey," he sobbed. "Honey, I am so sorry. I am so sorry. I did not mean to. It was not supposed to be like this." I sat in the chair on the other side of the table, keeping my expression neutral. Ms. Luna and Frank stood behind me, a silent but comforting presence. "Do not call me honey," I said, my voice coming out colder than I expected. "You lost the right to call me that when you hired someone to kill me." "No, no," he denied, shaking his head violently. "You do not understand. I never wanted you to get hurt, I swear. It was Sarah. She was the one who—" "Do not blame Sarah," I interrupted him. I saw the messages. All of them. I know you were involved in this from the beginning. Michael froze. The mask of regret slipped a little, and for a moment I saw something darker in his eyes. Why, I asked, my voice breaking. I loved you. I would have given you anything. If you needed money, I would have helped you. If you did not love me anymore, we could have divorced. Why choose to kill me? He looked down at his own handcuffed hands on the table. You would not understand, he murmured. Make me understand. There was a long silence. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, colder, more honest perhaps. Because you were too easy, he said. You trusted everything I said. You signed everything I asked. You never questioned anything. You were so obedient, so predictable. And I started to despise you for that. Each word was a stab, but I forced myself to remain impassive. When I met Sarah, she was the opposite of you. She was challenging, smart, ambitious. She made me feel alive in a way you never did. And yes, I know it sounds cruel, but you asked for the truth. And the money. Michael gave a bitter smile. The money made everything possible. I had debts, lots of debts. I had made stupid investments, bet on businesses that failed. The loan sharks were chasing me. I needed a way out. And you, with all that inheritance from your dad, were the perfect way out. So you used me from the beginning. Not from the beginning, he admitted. In the beginning, I really liked you. But when your dad died and you inherited everything that was, when I realized the potential, and when the debt started to squeeze when Sarah entered the scene, the plan began to make sense. The plan to kill me. The plan to solve all my problems at once, he corrected, as if they were the same thing. You would die thinking you were loved. Sarah and I would keep the money to live the life we deserved. Everyone won, except me. I would be dead. Michael shrugged. He actually shrugged as if my death was a minor detail in the big scheme of things. It was in that moment that any vestige of love that might still exist inside me died completely. There was no more pain. There was only a cold void where a heart used to be. You are going to rot in prison, I said calmly, and every penny you stole from me will be returned. Every property you tried to transfer illegally will come back to my name, and Sarah will join you behind bars eventually. Sarah is in Paris, Michael said with a smug smile. They will never catch her. We will see. I got up. I hope you both enjoyed these days of freedom because they will be the last ones you will have for the next 20 or 30 years. I started to turn to leave, but Michael called me. Wait. I stopped, but did not turn around. Are you going to forgive me someday? He asked, and for the first time since I entered the room, his voice sounded genuinely vulnerable. I turned slowly and looked at him one last time. Forgiving means that what you did had some value, some meaning worth being reconciled. But what you did had no value whatsoever. It was petty, cowardly, and pathetic. So no, Michael, I am not going to forgive you. I am simply going to forget you, as if you never existed in my life. I walked out of the room without looking back. In the hallway, I let the tears finally fall. But they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of closure, of liberation. Are you okay? Frank asked, putting a protective hand on my shoulder. Yes, I replied and realized it was true. I am okay. For the first time in days, I am really okay. Ms. Luna checked her phone and smiled. I have good news. The Interpol accepted our request. There is an international arrest warrant against Sarah. As soon as she tries to return to the U.S. or travel to any European country with an extradition treaty, she will be detained. How much time does she have of freedom? Not much. She already bought a return ticket to Mexico in 3 days. Probably she was planning to return when she thought things had calmed down. Pretend she knew nothing about Michael's plan. And when she gets arrested, will she face the same charges as him? Exactly. Conspiracy to commit murder, participation in a planned crime, complicity. She might receive even more time than Michael because the evidence shows it was her who found the hired criminal. 3 days later, I received the call I was waiting for. Sarah had been arrested at the airport in Madrid when she was trying to check in for her flight back to Mexico. The Spanish authorities executed the international warrant and transferred her to a holding cell until extradition procedures were concluded. But unlike Michael, who immediately tried to blame her, Sarah remained completely silent. She did not ask for a lawyer, did not give statements. She just sat in her cell, staring at the wall. The Spanish officers said she seemed to be in shock, as if she could not believe she had been caught. In the following weeks, my life turned upside down, but this time in a positive way. With Ms. Luna's help, I managed to annul all fake power of attorney documents and illegal transfers. Michael's offshore accounts were located and blocked. The process of recovering the funds would be long, but at least it was underway. The apartment where I had lived with Michael was put up for sale. I could no longer step in that place without feeling nausea. Every corner held memories contaminated by his lies. I bought a smaller, more cozy apartment in another neighborhood, a place that was only mine without ghosts from the past. Frank remained a constant presence in my life. He became more than a protector. He became a true friend, a father figure my father was no longer here to be. Sometimes we had dinner together, and he told me stories about my dad I had never heard. It made me feel connected to him again. "Your dad was a very wise man," Frank told me one night during one of those dinners. He told me once that trust is the most precious thing we can give someone, but also the most dangerous. Because once broken, it never goes back to what it was before. He was right, I agreed. I trusted too much. I was naive. No, Frank shook his head. "You were not naive. You were kind, generous, loving. Do not let the betrayal of a bad person turn you into someone suspicious and bitter. Your dad would not like that." His words stayed with me. Michael's trial happened 6 months after his arrest. The room was full. The media was present, and I was sitting in the front row, determined to look him in the eye during every moment of the process. He had lost weight in jail, and his face was thinner, older. His lawyer tried to claim he had been coerced by Sarah, that she was the true mind behind everything. But the evidence was irrefutable. The text messages clearly showed he was an active and enthusiastic participant in the plan. When it was my turn to testify, I went up to the stand and related everything. The night in the car with Frank, the discovery of the photos, the lies, the fear I felt when I thought I was going to die. My voice remained firm during the entire testimony, even when tears streamed down my face. Michael did not look at me a single time during my testimony. He kept his eyes down, looking like a man who had already accepted his fate. The sentence was 25 years in prison, without possibility of parole for 15 years. For attempted qualified murder document forgery, embezzlement, and a list of other crimes. When the judge struck the gavel, I felt a huge weight being lifted from my shoulders. Justice had been done. Sarah was extradited to the U.S. 3 months after Michael's trial. Her trial was even more dramatic because, unlike him, she decided to fight. She hired the best lawyer she could find and tried to argue she had been manipulated by Michael, that she was a victim of his lies too. But the evidence did not allow that narrative. The messages showed that many times it was Sarah who took the initiative, who made the most sordid suggestions. It was her who found the criminal to kidnap me. It was her who suggested making it look like a robbery gone wrong. The worst moment of the trial was when the prosecution presented a conversation between Sarah and Michael that happened days before the kidnapping attempt. In that conversation, they talked about how their new life would be after I was out of the way. Sarah even mentioned that part of the money would be used to get plastic surgery to look even prettier for Michael. She'd calculated the value of my life and decided it was worth less than a cosmetic surgery. When my time came to testify at her trial, Sarah finally looked me in the eye. And unlike Michael, who seemed regretful, although falsely, Sarah looked at me with pure hate, as if I were the villain of the story for having survived. Sarah, the prosecutor, asked her during her own testimony, "Do you have anything to say to the victim?" Sarah looked directly at me and said, "Yes, you were always boring. You were always bland. Michael only stayed with you for the money from the beginning," he told me several times. "You were never enough." The words should have hurt me, but instead they made me realize Sarah had never been my friend, neither before Michael nor during. She had always been an actress playing a role waiting for the right moment to show her true colors. "Thank you for showing me who you really are," I replied calmly. Now I know I did not lose a friend because I never had one. Sarah received 20 years in prison, a little less than Michael, but still a significant sentence. When she was taken from the courtroom, handcuffed and crying, I realized I did not feel satisfaction. I did not feel joy for her punishment. I felt only emptiness and then relief that that chapter was finally closed. A year after the trials, my life had found a new rhythm. I went back to work as a graphic designer, but now with a confidence I never had before. I opened my own studio and it was doing well. I made new friends, genuine people who entered my life and showed me what true friendship means. I started going to therapy to process all the trauma and slowly learned to trust again, but more wisely this time. Frank remained an important part of my life. He took me to dinner once a week, advised me on business decisions, and was always available when I needed to talk. He never charged anything for having saved my life. He said he had made a promise to my dad, and honoring that promise was payment enough. On a Thursday afternoon, exactly 2 years after that terrible night at the airport, I received a letter. It was from Michael, from prison. I stared at the envelope for a long time, deciding if I should open it or just throw it away. Curiosity won. The letter was long, pages and pages of his always impeccable handwriting. He talked about how prison had changed him, how he had time to think about everything he had done wrong. He said he finally understood the gravity of his actions, that he was in therapy and working on becoming a better person. On the last page, he wrote, "I know I do not deserve your forgiveness, and I am not asking for it. I just wanted you to know I am truly sorry. You deserved true love, loyalty, respect, and I failed to give you all that. I hope you found the happiness you always deserved." I folded the letter back in the envelope. I am not going to lie. Part of me felt moved by the words, but another part, the part that had grown and matured through this experience, knew that pretty words do not change horrible actions. I put the letter in a box where I kept all the documents from the trial. One day, maybe years in the future, I might look back and forgive him, not for him, but for me, to finally let go of any vestige of resentment. But today was not that day. That night, I sat on the balcony of my new apartment looking at the city lights. I thought about how my life had changed dramatically in 2 years, how I had gone from being a naive and trusting wife to a woman who was almost murdered, to someone who fought for justice and won. It was not the journey I would have chosen, but it was the journey that brought me here, to this version of myself that was stronger, wiser, more complete than I had ever been. I took my cell phone and called Frank. "Hi," I said when he answered. "I just wanted to say thank you for everything, for saving my life, for honoring the promise you made to my dad, for being the hero I did not know I needed." "It was an honor," Frank replied, his voice warm and sincere. "Your dad would be very proud of the woman you became. I know I am." After hanging up, I stared at the night for a while longer, and for the first time in years, I felt completely at peace. The months that followed brought transformations I never imagined were possible. My design studio was growing. I had received contracts from big companies that admired not only my work, but also my story of overcoming. Some business magazines had published articles about my journey, portraying me as an example of female resilience. At first, I had hesitated to make my story public. It was so personal, so painful. But Ms. Luna convinced me that sharing it could help other women in similar situations, women who maybe did not have the luck of having a Frank to save them. And she was right. After the first interviews, I began to receive messages from women all over the country. Some telling their own stories of betrayal and financial abuse, others asking for advice on how to identify red flags in relationships, some simply thanking me for having the courage to speak up. I decided to use my experience for something positive. With part of the money I recovered from Michael, I created a foundation to help women victims of domestic violence and financial abuse. We offered free legal assistance, psychological help, and even temporary shelter for those who needed to escape dangerous situations. Frank became the foundation's security consultant, training women and their children on how to protect themselves, how to identify risk situations, and what to do in emergencies. In one of the talks I gave at the foundation, a young woman of about 25 approached me afterward. She was crying, but they were tears of hope. "Thank you," she said, holding my hands. "My story is similar to yours. My boyfriend has manipulated me financially for years. I believed I was alone, that it only happened to me. But listening to you, I realized it is not my fault and I can escape." In that moment, all the sleepless nights, all the moments of pain, all the tears I shed, gained a new meaning. My suffering had not been in vain if I could help even just one person. Personal life also began to bloom in unexpected ways. I had met someone, an architect named Andrew, who had designed the project for the foundation's new headquarters. He was gentle, genuine, and most importantly, patient with my trauma and my barriers. "I am in no hurry," he told me on one of our first dates, when I explained I needed to take it slow, that it was difficult to trust after everything I had been through. "You are worth the wait." It was not like it had been with Michael. There was no overwhelming and blind passion, but there was something better. Mutual respect, honest communication, and a gradual growth of feelings that were based on who we really were not, on masks we wore. Andrew knew my whole story. I had been completely honest about what happened, about my fears and insecurities, and he never used that against me, never made me feel weak or broken. On the contrary, he admired my strength. "You survived something that would have destroyed most people," he told me one night while we were having dinner in a cozy restaurant. "And not only did you survive, but you transformed that pain into something that helps other people. That is extraordinary." 3 years after that fateful night at the airport, I received another letter. This time, it was from Sarah. Like Michael's, this letter was full of apologies, regrets, promises that she had changed. But unlike Michael's letter, which at least sounded sincere, Sarah's had a tone of manipulation I could now identify easily. She wrote about how she was suffering in prison, how other inmates treated her badly when they found out what she had done. She mentioned health problems she was developing, and then on the last page she made a request. Could I write a letter to the judge asking for a sentence reduction? After all, we had been best friends once. I shook my head while reading. Sarah was still Sarah, always calculating, always trying to manipulate, always believing tears and sad stories would give her what she wanted. I did not answer the letter. It was not necessary. Sarah had made her choices and now needed to live with the consequences. But I kept the letter together with Michael's, not as a memory of pain, but as a reminder of how much I had grown, of how I was no longer that woman who trusted blindly, who asked no questions, who put others' needs before her own. On a Sunday afternoon, 4 years after everything had happened, I was in the kitchen of my apartment making lunch. Andrew was in the living room assembling a bookshelf we had bought. Soft music played on the stereo, and through the window I could see the blue, cloudless sky. My cell phone rang. It was Frank. "Hello, dear," he said, his voice sounding tired. "I have news. What happened?" Michael tried to commit suicide in prison. He is in the hospital now, stable, but it was serious. My heart tightened, not from love or romantic concern, but from a basic human sadness. As much as he had hurt me, hearing that someone had reached such a point of despair was difficult. "How do you feel about it?" Frank asked. I thought for a moment before answering. Sad, I admitted, but not guilty. He made choices that led him to where he is, and I hope he finds some peace eventually, however that happens. But it is not my responsibility to save him. Not anymore. "You have grown a lot," Frank said, and I could hear the pride in his voice. "You have become exactly the kind of woman your dad dreamed you would be. Strong, compassionate, but with healthy boundaries." After hanging up, I stood in the kitchen for a moment, processing the news. Andrew came to hug me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. "Everything okay?" he asked softly. "Yes," I replied, and it was true. Everything is okay. That night, after Andrew went home and I was alone in the apartment, I took a box I kept in the back of the closet. It was where I had put everything related to Michael and Sarah. Letters, wedding photos, small souvenirs from a time that seemed to belong to another life. I took the box to the balcony and began to go through each item. Some photos still made me feel a twinge of pain. Memories of moments I thought were genuine, but were just theater. But the pain was distant now, like an old scar that no longer hurts. I took one last photo. It was from my wedding. Michael and I cutting the cake, smiling at the camera. Sarah was in the background clapping. If I looked closely now, I could see something in her eyes. A glint that was not happiness for the friend, but maybe envy or calculation. How had I not seen it? How had I been so blind? But then I remembered Frank's words. It had not been blindness, it had been kindness. It had been love and trust, things that are not flaws. People like Michael and Sarah were the problem, not people like me. I put the photo back in the box, and for the first time, I seriously considered getting rid of everything. I no longer needed to keep these things. I no longer needed physical evidence that had happened. It was engraved in my memory. It had shaped me, but it no longer defined me. I decided that the next week I would take the box to a recycling center. It was time to let go completely. 5 years after that night at the airport, my life was unrecognizable from what it had been. Andrew and I had gotten married in a small, intimate ceremony, only with people we truly loved. Frank walked me down the aisle, assuming the role my father would have played. The foundation was flourishing. It had already helped hundreds of women escape dangerous situations. My design studio was a success, and most importantly, I was happy. Genuinely, deeply happy. It was not a naive happiness like it had been before. It was an informed happiness, tempered by difficult experiences, but real nonetheless. Maybe even more real because of that. I received one last notification about Michael. He had been transferred to a psychiatric wing of the prison after the suicide attempt. He was receiving treatment, and according to reports, he was finally making real progress in accepting responsibility for his actions. I hope it is true. Not for me, but for him. Everyone deserves the chance to become a better person, even if that happens behind bars. As for Sarah, I heard through Ms. Luna that she had become a model prisoner. She was studying law through a distance program and helping other inmates with legal issues. Whether it was genuine or just another manipulation to reduce the sentence, I do not know. But I choose to believe people can change, even if it is not my role to facilitate that for them. Today, when I tell my story, it is no longer with pain or anger. It is with strange gratitude. Gratitude for having survived. Gratitude because Frank honored the promise he made to my father. Gratitude for the lessons learned the hard way. That night at the airport, when Frank locked the car doors and said, "Trust me," it was the moment my life changed forever. It was the moment I discovered the world is not always what it seems, that people we love can betray us, but also that guardian angels exist in unexpected places. If I could go back in time and change that night, would I change everything that happened? I do not know if I would, because this journey, however painful it has been, transformed me into the woman I am today, a woman I am not ashamed to be. And in the end, maybe that is the best revenge against those who tried to destroy me. I not only survived, but I thrived. Now, if you like this story, click subscribe and tell me in the comments which part left you with your mouth open. Oh, and do not forget to become a member to get access to exclusive videos I do not publish here. I will see you there.